Would you leave home to head out on the road on a multi-week, multi-state speaking and book signing tour with only a couple of $100 to your name? In this episode of the I Can't See You podcast, my guest is going to talk about how he did just that and wrote a book about it.
From Studio C, welcome to the I Can't See You podcast with David. He can't see, but he's got a lot to say and a face for radio.
Hello there, and welcome to episode 87 of the I Can't See You podcast. My name is David, at David Benj on all the socials. I really appreciate you joining me for today's episode, and I've got a good one lined up. In a couple of minutes, I'll bring out Max, and he'll talk about his new book. And it is a good book and available in a couple of different formats, so you can look for that. But before I get into the interview with Max, I do want to talk about a couple of things. Last week, I had mentioned that I was having some issues with the website, and I think most of them are cleared up now. So if you do want to order some coffee from White Cane Coffee Company, you can go through my link there, and that would be ican'tseeyou.com/coffee. That's ican'tseeyou, ICANTCU.com/coffee. Remember, I can't see you. It's only 7 letters, though it sounds like a whole sentence. And I would appreciate you doing that because that doesn't benefit me particularly. It benefits the Keystone Chapter of the National Federation of the Blind of Pennsylvania, of which I am the treasurer. And any purchase you make using that link, ican'tseeyou.com/coffee, or any of the links on the website, will help out with a commission that goes to the Keystone Chapter. It's been difficult for us to fundraise with the COVID going on, and so we've been behind in raising money for all the good things that we do there, like helping St. Lucy's and some other things that we do, helping blind folks, and especially like the kids at St. Lucy's. It would just go a long way. So again, that's ican'tseeyou.com/coffee. Check out White Cane Coffee Company, and they have some great products. Again, the Colombian Supremo is my favorite. And if you do need a pick-me-up in the afternoon, the high octane is great. Don't drink it too late in the day, or your day will last a little bit longer. And but it is good. It is good for a nice jolt in the afternoon to keep you going. And they've got plenty of other flavors and roasts and stuff like that. So give them a check. Check them out. ican'tseeyou.com/coffee, and they are located at whitecanecoffee.com. If you want to just go directly there to have a look. But again, I'd appreciate it if you use that ican'tseeyou.com/coffee, because that does help the Keystone Chapter out. Also, a link that didn't work when the site was down was my Amazon link, or any of the links. And the easiest way to get to Amazon to help us out with a small commission when you make a qualifying purchase, you go to ican'tseeyou.com/Amazon, and any purchase you make, it doesn't cost you anything more, but it does help us out and pays us a commission, some as little as 1%, some as much as 10%, but any little bit is helpful, and we do appreciate that, and that helps pay for some of the stuff that we do here on the podcast, like the hosting or the website, or to fix the website. So again, I would really appreciate that. Now, I got a text late in the week from my friend Dan, and he said, "You got 87 coming up next week. You're not going to make it." And I said, "Absolutely not. Why would I make episode 87 the crybaby episode? It just wouldn't happen." And for those of you that don't follow sports, there's a guy that wears number 87. His name is Sidney Crosby. He plays for the Pittsburgh Penguins, and he is just a crybaby. So I should change what I just said. If I were doing an episode on baby products or tissues that are great for, all the sobbing that you may be doing, then maybe it would be the Sidney Crosby episode. But nope. Episode 87, I have determined, and I know not a lot of folks like the New England Patriots, especially if you're not in New England. However, number 87 was their tight end. So we're going to call this the Gronk episode. And again, you might not like him, but if you play fantasy football like I do and a lot of folks do, if you got Gronk on your team, it's like having an extra wide receiver. He just added that many more points over other tight ends. So let's call this the Gronk episode. And he is now, if there is a season, playing for my mom's hometown team, the Tampa Bay Bucks. Not that the Bucks were in business when my mom grew up down there, many moons ago. But they are her hometown team, and she always had a thing for them, just in passing, because she hated sports. But she was happy that they got a team when they did back in the 70s, and started off so well. So this is the Gronk episode. And one other thing before we get to Max, I do want to talk about. Last week, I talked about a solution for working from home, and we kind of came up with a solution, which I said we started to look for a house. Well, in the time that has passed since I recorded the last episode, where I think we had looked at 1 or 2 houses, we actually bought one. So I will have more on that on another episode, but it just went so fast. The real estate market for housing is just incredible. And we actually looked at a house, and it's literally around the corner from where we are now. We looked at a house right down the street from this one that we ended up buying, and it was horrible. It had paneling everywhere, and it was the 1970s threw up in there. It was brick veneer and paneling. Maybe the guy worked or owned a paneling store because it was everywhere. The one that we ended up buying, we actually made an offer and agreed to buy it before we even set foot in it, because they weren't allowing folks to walk through it until the weekend. And because of how hot the market is, we actually offered above the asking price, and we got it. And we actually offered what the house that we looked at, we actually offered what they were asking, because we figured if that house was worth that, then the house that's already had all these things done to it is certainly worth that. And, so we bought it. And then we actually, after we signed the agreement of sale, on Saturday, we got to look at it, and we actually went through the inspection yesterday. So it looks like come mid-September, we will own it. We won't move in straight away because we do have to finish the basement. So I will be moving from Studio C to Studio B, which will be down there in the basement. My office and studio will be a much bigger space where I can accommodate a little bit of equipment that I can't accommodate in my office/closet. So again, I'll have an update and I'll talk more about it next week, because there were a lot of issues for me, because I can't see, and a lot of the documentation and forms and even some of the agreements were not accessible. So I'll talk about that next week, and maybe I'll even have, if she has time, and she is running ragged, our real estate agent, Branca, maybe she'll take a minute and we can ask her a few questions, and she can talk about what you can do to sell your house and move into a new house during the pandemic. Because I never imagined, thinking back a month ago, I never imagined that I would have moved, let alone in the conditions that are now. But yep, we're going to do it. Those are my updates for today's episode. So let's get into today's feature, which is a guest who has written a brand new book. It is called The Blind Blogger's First Speaking and Signing Adventures and How to Conquer Your Fears. It is available at Amazon.com in 2 versions, a Kindle version and a paperback version. And just so you know, if you're blind or visually impaired, the Kindle version has the voiceover enabled, so you can have voiceover read the book to you, which is the way I listen to it. I listen to it kind of like I listen to podcasts. It took me 3 dishwashing sessions, and I got through it. And it was nice to listen to. You can listen to whatever speed you have your voiceover set. It was outstanding to do, and I'm actually looking forward to listening to more books that way. So that was very cool. So I Can't See You podcast listeners, please welcome my friend Maxwell Ivey Jr. Max, I appreciate you coming on today's episode. Thanks for being with me today.
Well, David, I appreciate you having me back on the show and having me back so soon, because it hasn't been very long since we sat down to talk about Podfest and podcasting and our mutual journeys through vision loss. So I really appreciate that. And who knew, just basically trying to find out if I could send somebody a copy of my book would turn out to get me a podcast booking. I'm going to have to try that more often.
There you go. Well, if I remember correctly, and I'll note the first interview in the show notes, but I think we talked about, during that interview, that once you had the book out, I'd have you back. So I think it's been about 3 months. I want to say it was April that either late March or early April you were on, and so it's been a few months. So
but when you consider that most podcasters do an episode a week, I would to do a show for a second time before a calendar rolled over again, to me just seems soon. So I appreciate it.
Right. Oh, you're of course. And I have to tell you, I really enjoyed the book. And again, the book is called The Blind Blogger's First Speaking and Signing Adventure, and how you can conquer your fears. And I think that second part is the positive note of the book. I liked at the end of each chapter, you gave the takeaways, and it gave people inspiration on, hey, look, everything doesn't go as planned. And and you just have to roll with it. And as I've always said, and I laughed at some of the things, because some of the things that you went through, I always would tell my wife or my kids, I would say, well, if it doesn't go right, at least it'll be a podcast episode. And
exactly,
and that's exactly what you did. How long ago did you know you were going to write this book?
I thought that eventually there would be another book after the New York City book, simply because I continued to have reason to go places and give talks or meet other people. And it does seem like I tend to get into more trouble than the average bear, to borrow the expression from Yogi. Part of that is my willingness to go out on the road without a whole lot of money in my pocket, and the other part of it is just the desire to. I just don't want to pass on great experiences because things weren't perfect, and so I've probably left town more than once when I should have stayed home. But as you said, that results in a book, a podcast episode, a blog post, a podcast interview. So it's all great storytelling, and of course, I know you've exchanged messages with my editor, Lorraine, regularly at wordingwell.com, and she likes to say, Max, you get into more shit than any one other person I know, but you always come out of it smelling like a rose with a story to tell. And I'm like, thank you very much. That's kind of my brand, because I'm definitely an almost good enough is better than perfect kind of a person, as you know from being on my podcast. I'm really let's just do this and see how it turns out and get better as we go. But you're right. The book is a great example of even somebody that's doing pretty well, that's accomplished some stuff, doesn't mean it all went the way he wanted it to. I mean, right. or that at that particular moment he was able to use his own methods and find the positive immediately, or move on to the next thing immediately. Sometimes there was a little bit of a lag in there, and sometimes people have come to my rescue. Sometimes I have made my own rescue. And sometimes I've just decided, well, things should be worse. I'm just going to stay where I'm at a little while and see what happens next. So, right. I hope the book encourages people to realize that we're not intended to know it all. We're not intended to have these experiences that are perfect. That the stuff that doesn't go as well as we hope to, and the way we live through that, is the more important part.
Right. And that's the biggest takeaway for me that you said in the book. And it's something that I always harp on with my kids or with people I know. In fact, one of the girls who is in our Keystone chapter, I said, look, you just have to start it. Once you start it, it's going to suck at the beginning. You're just going to, I'm trying to get her to do, she's got a great speaking voice, and she can do it, and she just has to start, because it's not going to be great at the beginning, and you just have to take action. And that was, the bottom line. You got out, and you weren't afraid to go. Now, I have to tell you that all of it I agreed with. I don't know if I have the balls to go out on my own with not enough money in my pocket to wonder if I'm going to get back.
Okay, I'm going to help you out there. You have to remember, for me personally, I spent 15 years traveling around the country with a carnival with less than no money some of the time. I've got a lot of experience in just finding a way to get to the next day, next week, next town. So, I have muscles built up over a lifetime of really just having to get to finding a way to get open. That was the mindset in the carnival business. As long as we can get open, something good can happen. So we're just going to get open this week. So you do that for 15 years, and it kind of makes you feel like you can pretty much do anything you want to. And of course, then when stuff happens and your plan is screwed all to heck, you're like, why did I do this again? What made me think I could do this again? And how the heck do we get from here to next week? So yeah, and I think one of the most important things I do whenever I write a blog post or do a podcast interview or write my books is I always include the stuff that didn't go the way I wanted it to and what the result was, what I learned from it, how I managed to get past it, through it, whatever. So I personally thought I was impressed when I learned about you at Podfest, because that was pretty much your first trip, maybe ever, or at least in many, many years, that you weren't accompanied by your wife or someone else in your family. So, I mean, I was really impressed with what you did. I mean, you made me feel ashamed to be blind that week.
Well, I took a trip, and that was my first air travel without any family members in probably, well, that was earlier this year. So in 19 years, in 2001, I went to Miami for a trade show for a business that a partner and I were going to buy, and we ended up not buying it. We couldn't come to terms with the current owner, and my vision was better then. And I had such difficulty, it was before I used a cane. I had such difficulty getting through the Miami airport, looking for the gate and looking for everything, that it was, yeah, and the way that airport was set up at the time, and I don't know if this is still the case, each concourse looked almost identical with the way the stores were laid out. They had 3 stores on this side, 5 stores on this side, and then there was a hallway in the middle that was the concourse that took you to the planes. And I had, I couldn't see the signs. But again, I wasn't using a cane. So, people are looking at me funny, and so I was a little apprehensive. But, in the meantime, once I got the cane training and once I got comfortable traveling, thinking about you're traveling from Houston to New Orleans and onward, the biggest issue for me would have been, okay, you're going to stop in a city that you're not going to be ending up in. So what do you do in that time, and where do you go? Because unlike being outside on the street where you may be able to see a landmark or figure that out, inside there's never any maps or anything. They don't have a map of a concourse usually. I've looked for it like in the New York subways or at Penn Station, which you talked about at the in the book. And so, businesses come and go so quickly that, the last time you made a right at the Chick-fil-A, but now it's not a Chick-fil-A, it's a McDonald's, or vice versa, whatever it is. So it's difficult when you're inside. Outside, I had gone to New York this winter to visit my daughter for her birthday. And I walked around, I went from Penn Station, I went to B&H Photo, and then I went to, over to the public library, and to Winter Village behind the public library. And then her office was a couple blocks away from that. So, I was able to do that. And just like what you were saying, you kind of develop a way of getting one place to another. And mine is, I try to follow someone. I figured, okay, well, that person in front of me hopefully can see better than me. And if I hear them stopping, I'm going to stop. If I hear them continuing on, I figure, okay, it's safe. And it was great, when I would get behind a person, especially, a woman that I got behind going from B&H Photo going over to Winter Village. She had boots on that made, hard sole boots. So,
Oh
I
yeah,
was
that's
just, she was walking at a good, I like to walk fairly quickly. She was walking at a good
yes.
clip, weaving through the people on the sidewalk, because there were, it was rush hour at this point. I'm weaving through afternoon pedestrian rush, and I was so disappointed when she turned off. I'm like, oh, come on, we're almost there. So,
Yeah.
and it's just, you develop stuff like that, and it made it, so up until listening to your book where you stopped in New Orleans, I'm thinking, okay, well, I've gone to New York, I've gone to Washington, I've gone to Baltimore, all on the train on my own. It's really not that big a difference. I have to take the train from, Swarthmore into Philadelphia, then I change at 30th Street, and then I get on the train to wherever. But to get on and then have to get off somewhere, that I haven't really done, via Amtrak, where, when you're in Philadelphia, if I have to catch the train home, and again, they're always from the same state, from the same platform. So I kind of know I got to go, past this
Right.
place, and,
Yeah.
so that I
But
was,
yeah, but in New Orleans, I had the advantage of I'm not one of those people that's going to run the town at 3 o'clock in the morning,
okay.
and didn't really want to be spending a night in a motel, basically just to sleep, and really have only about 5 or 6 hours of that before I'd be back on the train. So um, I found Chicago actually more like what you're talking about, because I got into Chicago during the middle of the day and I had 4 hours there. So
Okay.
Chicago, while I had some problems with my train ticket in Chicago on the way back from, and so I didn't go outside and go around. But apparently there's actually some stuff to do within walking distance of the Union Station in Chicago, and since I was there in the middle of the day, then it would be more like what you're talking about. So, but still, what I would do, and this, I don't know if this is how you would do it or not. What I would do is I would find out in advance what is nearby, and then I would start by asking one of the Amtrak staff to go, okay, I'm going to here. Is anybody going that way that you know of? Or can you at least tell me how many blocks it is, and try to give me a lay of the land that I'm going to be traveling to get where I'm going. So, and I've told you this. I'm not. Last summer, I went to speak at an event in Wichita, Kansas, and after being around a whole bunch of blind people for a week, I realized that my cane skills are even worse than I thought they were. and we've talked about that, but I was recently talking to one of the Texas Workforce Commission counselors. The TWC is the rehab agency here in Texas that
Okay.
it doesn't just do rehabilitation; it also does employment for people that are minorities or disadvantaged. So,
Gotcha. Okay.
And we were talking about this, and I told some of my stories, and they laughed, and I said, I realized that I could probably use some more training, but I said, here's how I approach it. And her response was, oh, you're a problem solver. I love working with those kinds of travelers because they're the easiest kind of people to work with. And I'm like, well, that's my approach. My approach is I would rather walk up to a stranger and ask them for help, possibly follow them where they're going, except sighted guide as opposed to using my cane and listening for their steps. But, we have a similar approach. We want to find somebody going the way we're going. We want to ask them or either just follow them or ask them if we can follow them. And, at PodFest, that was the first time in a while that I had followed somebody's steps. And that was really a challenge because we had hard floors and carpeted floors and places where the ambient noise was obscuring your footsteps. But I still think I did a pretty good job for following your footsteps for the first time I had done that in forever.
Right.
So,
well, in that lobby, just the sound there was such a big lobby with the fountain going. I actually in that lobby, I had to go sometimes by the way the air conditioning was blowing to figure out, oh, I need to turn here. especially at night when, because it was such a huge lobby, it wasn't very well lit. Um, at least in the middle where you walk, obviously along the edge where you check in and check out, and the bell staff was, that was, lit so they could see, but, that was around the perimeter. In the middle, was, they had it was like a big atrium. So,
Yeah.
so that made it difficult to navigate unless you, figured a few things out. And I know one night I walked through there and the fountain wasn't on. I'm like, oh my God. I didn't, am I going the right way? So,
Yeah.
it's just like you say, you just have to figure stuff out. And, talking about following people, when I was getting off the plane in Orlando, they said, oh, we'll get you a wheelchair. And I said, no, I don't need a wheelchair. And I noticed there was somebody in a wheelchair on the plane. I said, is somebody coming for this lady? And she's, one of the staff said, yeah. I said, I'll just follow them. I mean, I'm assuming she's not getting on another plane. And the funny part is she actually was. But there was another guy once I got up out of the jetway. There was another guy that was waiting to go to baggage claim from another flight. So, the guy came to pick him up, and I said, I'm just going to follow you down to the baggage claim. And I did, and I was good to go. And
yeah. And the point of all of this for you gentle listener, that's an expression they used in the day when I would listen to TV, is that it really doesn't matter what your solution is, as long as it works for you, and as long as you can rely on it, even in unique and sometimes stressful situations. So, David, he's a guy who likes to show up early and find his way around. Me, I'm the kind of guy I want to find somebody and ask them if I can go where they're going, and generally hope to make some new friends while I'm getting from point A to point B. And then there are other people like my friend Michael Babcock from Oregon, who's a real tech person, and his answer is finding an app on his phone that will allow him to navigate a train station or an airport.
Okay.
So it really just depends on, figure out what type of person you are, and then what works best for you. I recently did a podcast interview where I was interviewing a guy, and I told him about how, I'm not as organized as I would like to be. And he was saying, don't think about that as a weakness. He said, yeah, it's something you'd probably like to improve on. He said, but once you know who you are and how you like to do things, you can then use that to come up with solutions that are going to work more often. And I said, okay, so what you're telling me is I got to do like Danny DeVito in Caddyshack 2, where the one guy came up to him and said, you have the worst slice in the history of golf. Let's use it for you. And so he took the guy and turned his shoulders. So instead of facing the fairway, he was first facing the rough, and his horrible slice would then have the ball end up going straight down the middle of the fairway. I said, so that's what you're trying to get at, is just because it's something I would like to improve on doesn't mean it's a negative, especially if I figure out a way to use it. So my let's call it, dislike of depending solely on my cane skills is not a negative, as long as it doesn't put me in a spot sometime where I'm stuck and I probably really can't get to the next street or whatever, which has never happened to me. And thankfully, there's always been somebody, and I like to believe that there will always be somebody else that will come along at that time when I need to go, okay, where do I go now?
Right. And that's some of the things that I seem to find those people when I don't need their help. They'll come up to me. I got off the train once, and the guy said to me, come on, where are you going? I said, oh, I'm going to blah, blah, blah. And he said, oh, I'll get you, he said, where you're going? I'm like, yeah, I'm good. He said, well, I'll help you out of the station. And he took me the whole way. I said, I'm good. I know where I'm going. And he wouldn't take no for an answer. Yet sometimes when I am places that, and I don't know what, that's one thing that you're so much better at than I am, because when I ask for help, I don't know if I just don't realize that people are talking to me, or if they're paying attention to me. Maybe they're talking with someone else. I just never know, for whatever reason. Even I do it around our house. I'll say to my wife or my kids, are you talking to me, or are you talking to one of the others? Are you talking on the phone? And that's one of the differences. I love to figure stuff out on my own, but obviously there's times that, I can't. And when I do need help, and I do I don't know if it's just that I'm a little apprehensive, if I'm a little shy, and I am a little shy, um, but look, when I have to go where I got to go, I got to ask.
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes I can use technology to get out of it, and I do. I use some of the apps and stuff like that. But um, you know, you'd mentioned something in there that reminded me of the quote that you said about your website, because I've been having issues with my website over the last week, and it
I'm
seems like
sorry to hear that. That's one of those things I would never wish on anybody. My dad used to say, "Never wish your enemies harm, because that will come back on you." And so, even without that, as you know, because as you know, I spent 5 years hand coding HTML and building my site one line of code at a time. So
right.
I know what it is to struggle with a website. So I would not wish that on anybody.
Well, that's the
And I
thing.
hope you get it straightened out soon.
Thanks. In the book, you had mentioned, the Ray Charles Stevie Wonder quote. That they'd have something to say about the website, and I thought, oh, to be back in that time when you actually had to, type this stuff up, because then at least I'd know what I was doing. Because now, with WordPress, everything is visual,
Yes, and
and
it's gotten even worse with the update to the block editor that they call Gutenberg. It's gotten
yes.
even worse, in my opinion.
Yes, and that was the issue. The theme that I had needed to be updated because there was a security threat. So once I updated, everything changed, meaning like where things were that I was used to going to. I just needed to update this one little blurb, and I'm now paying somebody to fix the whole site, because everything
Yeah,
I clicked on, I just completely trashed it. And so I was thinking about that quote, and thinking back to what you were telling me about what the site looked like back when we were at Podfest. You were saying the bright colors and everything. So I had to laugh when I was listening to that. And uh,
yeah, yeah. It's one of those things that my website was not perfect. It was not anywhere close. But like you say, it was something that I could do for myself, because I pretty much knew, well, if I want to add a link to a page, this is what I type. And the truth of the matter is, nowadays I actually get into trouble with WordPress, because sometimes I just say, the heck with this. I'm going to type this code into this page. And most of the time that works, but sometimes it creates problems where, where maybe the text color is wrong on WordPress, or maybe the link above it or below it didn't close properly. So now I've got one big link that is trying to run the whole page. So stuff like that happens because I used to do that stuff every day, and I haven't had a nightmare in a long time about less thans and greater thans. Thank goodness.
yeah, that's and I looking at the last week's, my last week's episode, the numbers were down on the downloads because, my site was down for most of the week. I shouldn't say it was down. The front page was there, and it looked like that you could get to the episode that way. But when you clicked on it, it went, you got a 404 error. And it's just, as it's just, probably one little thing. And the people that are, redoing the things that I need to have redone, bing, bang, boom, it's done in a second, because they're doing it all day long and they can see, probably a
Yeah,
combination of both. So,
yeah, and most of it is just repetition.
right.
They do it. They are very familiar. It's almost like when you hear an athlete talk about muscle memory. It's the same thing with mental muscle memory for people who code websites.
Right. One of the other things that stood out in the book, you were talking about, staying with friends and family, along the way. And you were talking about, I think it was your brother's place that he had some system set up for the water because he had a hole in his roof or something. So he had a system where you had to kind of duck around a pipe and do some things like that. That's where I would have so much difficulty, even after we moved in to this condo that we're in. It took me probably 3 or 4 months to realize, okay, I can't stand straight up here because, in my office, as I've mentioned before, it's the bottom half is an office. The top half is groceries and, it's a closet basically, a
Okay.
utility closet. So there are shelves on both sides. So if I was too close to one of the walls and I stood up, I'd bang my head on one of the shelves and then, cut my head open And we'll talk about hair in a minute, because that made me laugh too, with your hair issues and stuff like that. But so when you were talking about, it was your brother's, right, where you had to
Yeah, it was my brother's house where he had some issues with some squatters, and they did some damage to his mobile home, and so he rigged up something so that the water that would normally, most people's homes, they'd have a bucket and they'd empty the bucket. Not Michael. He's one of those people. He's a problem solver too, although I think that his problem solving is a little bit wired just a little bit differently than yours. So his thinking is, I'm not always home, so he rigged up a way for the water that should be coming through that hole to go through some plastic tubing to the other side of his kitchen and into his sink. And I basically just got in the habit of putting my left hand up so that I would know how low to get down to get underneath it. It was difficult, and I'm sure it would be funny if somebody saw me doing it, because I am 6'4", almost 6'5", so I'm kind of a tall person for a mobile home to start with, and then to have to duck under something that's coming down from the ceiling and coming down at a slanting angle crossing the kitchen. I would say I wasn't ever squatting, but
okay.
I think I was probably bent 75 or 80 degrees at the waist to get underneath it. But it was kind of a fun thing, because it's like, this is I'm basically living with whatever conditions I happen to find. And, at his house, and it was great getting to see him, because I hadn't seen him since my brother had his heart attack, which is like, wait a minute. Yeah. I'm trying to think how long ago that was. Like it had been several years since the last time I'd seen my brother, and it had been for a few hours. Before that, it was probably more than 10 years since the last time I'd seen him. So, if staying in his house was what it took, then that was cool. And the rest of the house I didn't think it was as bad off as he made it out, but then I couldn't see the house. So,
okay.
And that's one of the things I realized not this year at PodFest, but last year at PodFest. And I've also realized it at Michael's house. And this is, if you're blind, or, like me, I have light perceptions. I don't have a lot of vision. A year and a half ago at PodFest, I was one of the last people to get there. So they put me in this, they called it a bungalow,
okay.
But it was basically a block of rooms about a mile from the hotel. They would come and get me in a golf cart, and I never had any problem with the hotel people. I actually liked the hotel. It was great. Some great people worked there. I felt like the hotel staff at the previous year's hotel had more joy about their work than the staff at this year's, although the staff this year was much more professional.
Okay.
I'm in the shuttle going to the airport to come home, and I'm riding with three other women, and they're talking about the hotel, and they asked me where I stayed, and I told them, they said, they tried to put me in that crappy dump, and I told them I wouldn't stay there, that I'm not. And so I found out that this hotel room I was staying in, that, aesthetically it was very, very ugly, even dumpy, but to my way of thinking, the bed was comfortable. The plumbing worked. I had hot water for a shower and a bath. I had TV when I was there. They put bottled water in the room every morning. So I was very happy with the room. But other people, including one of the women I was riding to the airport with, was offered that room and told them, no, y'all going to put me in a room with a balcony where, So I think it's one of those cases where not only with rooms, but also with people, that I think I have a better time when I'm traveling as far as asking other people and trusting other people, because I really can't see y'all. I'm kind of down a lot of prejudices when I meet people in person, because I really just, I can't see them. They say I have light perception, but if it is, I would like to quibble with whoever ran the test,
Right,
so.
Right.
But I think that, as far as enjoying your surroundings, I have the advantage of not being able to see those homes. So I was more focused on the people I spent time with and all. But I think if more people would, would focus less on the surroundings and more on the experiences, they would have a lot better time. And that's what I
Right.
try to teach in my book.
Right. And that's, just listening to you talk about, going there, going to, I guess it was Michelle's house. Was that
Yeah. Yeah.
going there? And to me, when my wife is doing the laundry or something, she'll say, I put a clothes basket here. And I'm like, okay, that's great. But, later on, I'm going to forget you told me that and I'm going to fall over it. And so I will move it at least out of the way a little bit. And so thinking about as I'm listening, I'm thinking, oh my God, from a couple days in this place and just when you get used to that one place, you're moving to a different place, and I'm thinking, oh my God, and that's one thing. Like with a hotel, good room, bad room, it's got the beds on one side, it's got some cabinets and, whatever, maybe a desk on the other side. And then it's pretty much a straight shoot going into the bathroom and so forth. So, that's a little bit, you kind of get that down pretty quick. But, in somebody's house, they have a coffee table. You don't know how high up it is. I mean, I've been here for 4 years. We've had the same coffee table since, from probably the late 80s when I first moved out of my parents' house. And I still am running into it because I don't remember it's exactly there. And it's got sharp corners on it, and I'll nick my shins up on it, and so I was just thinking about that as you're talking about, especially your brothers, having to get under that. I would have forgotten at some point and either clotheslined myself or messed up his contraption to take the water out.
Yeah. Well, and you were talking about when you get used to a room, and I just hope you know how much I appreciated what you did for me at Podfest the last day, by you just taking it upon yourself to have the room swapped over from you to me, and having belongings moved and all that great stuff, man. That was really a big help, because at the end of that day I was tired, and all I had to do was go back to the room, lay down, order some room service, and listen to some TV. So
right.
I really appreciated you doing that, because I was not looking forward to having to mess with them people at the hotel and having to transfer either my stuff from your room to the room I had for Sunday, or having to talk to the desk people and explain to them, hey, I've been in this room. Can y'all just let me stay in this room? So that was really a big help. And now that I'm hearing you talk about, how you get used to places, I understand, why you did it. You did it because that's the kind of thing you would think about it if it was you in that room.
Right. And that's, again, that's the beauty. You knew from that room, you kind of knew how to go to when you wanted to go to Starbucks, or, go down to the, to meet people in the lobby or whatever. And you kind of had an idea on how to go. And, obviously it didn't take long to go and ask that question on one of my passes by the desk. So, so I was glad I was able to do that for you. And again, it didn't take me much time to do that. And I'm glad that all worked out. Because yes, I know, when you change surroundings, and that's, one of the things I talked about before we got on interviewing at the beginning of the podcast. My daughter found out last week that she's not going back into the office until sometime in 2021. So that means she'll be working from here until then. And once my wife starts school, it's going to be difficult, because we are in an apartment where there's, living room, dining room, kitchen is one giant room. So there's not really a good space where my wife can set up somewhere else to, when she first started last spring, when they started teaching from home, they were basically just, talking to the kids and singing and maybe reading a book. Then as time progressed, it worked out where they needed to have a little setup so my daughter was at a desk and my wife was at our dining room table. So when they both were doing, calls, it was kind of like a competing thing, and there wasn't another good spot in the apartment. So when we found that out last Monday or Tuesday, we actually started to look for a house. And we bought a house. Within 4 days, we found a place. And so, so all that is coming through. And now I started to worry because, again, I'm kind of used to where things are here. And, now we're going to move to someplace else.
Yeah.
So
Did you at least check it out to see if you have a couple, if you're relatively close to a couple of things you're going to need? I mean,
yes, well, that was when we first decided, when my daughter told us, and I said to my wife, I said, "Do you think we should look for a place?" And she's like, "Yeah, why don't you call the real estate agent?" And so I called her, and we used her when we sold our house 4 years ago, a little over 4 years ago. And I said, "Here's the places that we'd like to look." And I named a whole bunch of places near where we are, Swarthmore, and a whole bunch of places in Delaware County near where we are. And we went to look at one place, and we looked at this one place that we liked, that we thought we would like, because it was down at the end of the block. On one side was a trolley type service, and
okay,
about a half a mile the other way was trains that could get me into Center City, Philadelphia.
okay,
And so we thought, man, this would be great. We looked at the house. The house was awful. It was in a place
okay,
called Bryn Mawr. And when we looked at it, we also knew in the back of our minds we had to be near. Our son works at Target, and he's been working all throughout the pandemic, which has been great because, a lot of people got furloughed and laid off and whatnot. He got a $2 an hour raise, and he's been getting decent hours for the most part since everything started. So we don't want to, he doesn't drive. So there is a Target about 4 miles down the street where he could take, on the other end, not the block with the trolley, on the other end of the block, there's a bus stop, which he could get
okay,
on the bus, and he could, within 15, 20 minutes have been to that Target store, to work. So all of that played out. But when we talked to the realtor and we gave her all these places that we could look, and we started to set up something, we looked at this one place and we're like, wow, this house is great. And I'm like, wait a minute, there's not a Target nearby. And the one that he works at is too far away. He'd never be able to get to work. So we had to nix it. The place we bought is literally around the corner from us. We've walked over to it several times since we made the offer. And we actually made the offer before we were inside of this house. We saw pictures, and we were in a house down the street from it. So we kind of knew the layout, and by the pictures, we could kind of see how it differed from the one that we looked at. It's square footage wise, it's about the same as this apartment. However, the basement isn't finished. So that adds another few hundred square feet that we will finish to make, an office and another room, that we will have all that extra room. So there's an office all the way on the third floor. Somebody can work at the kitchen table on the main floor, and then down in the basement there will be an office for that's actually going to be mine. And I can't wait to have a have a proper studio and not be in the closet here, where I can get up and not bang my head on something, and I can I was looking when I went to Podfest. One of the things was to look at equipment, and I talked to Michael O'Neill, and he's like, "Oh, you should get this, and you should get this mic, and you do this setup, and do this and that and the other, instead of just using your computer to record, because like you, to make the settings on, I use GarageBand when I'm not doing an interview, so it's hard to tell. When you have a dial that's tactile, you can turn it and you figure, okay, here's 0, here's 100, and you want to go someplace in the middle, and you can feel where that is. But when it's a dial on a screen, you can't tell. And so I just, the desk that I have, there's no room for anything like that. So it'll be nice to as I call this Studio C where I am, because it is a closet. There at the new place will be called Studio B, because it'll be in the basement.
okay.
So I'm looking forward to it. And, again, it's just around the corner. So all of the places that we go now, the drugstore, there's a little market cafe, the train station is about half to 3/4 of a mile away. So it's all still really close. So we didn't lose anything there. And again, I don't know how long it's going to be that we'll be there, but at some point our plans are to, we never imagined that we'd be buying another house in this area.
Yeah. Hello.
Sorry.
Yeah.
My throat gave out.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you bought a house, and it got me thinking about here in the Houston area, because Houston is a big spread out area, over 75 miles one way, over 90 miles the other way. Inside Harris County, are you still hearing me?
I'm here. Yep, I'm here.
Okay. So inside Harris County, they have what's called paratrans. That means that people who are blind or otherwise disabled can request rides to and from places. And so I know people in the Houston area who, whenever they consider moving, they will not look at an apartment or a home without first checking to see whether it's in or out of Harris County.
Okay.
So, what you guys were doing, trying to find a home that would be a good fit for y'all as a family, but also, not put too much strain on you and your son as far as navigating to and from the places you need to get to. Those are the kind of considerations that blind people and families with blind members have to deal with.
Right, and that's we saw one in a community. I don't want to call it a town because it's really just a zip code, where we grew up in, both my wife and I, and we thought, oh, this would be great to be here. And I'm like, wait a minute, it's an extra mile away from downtown Swarthmore, where my son goes in to get breakfast most mornings, and where the train station is, and it's not near anything at all. It's a mile from the CVS and that Market Cafe that I was telling you about. So just to go there, it's that much longer. And I'm thinking that we can't even look here. And so it basically really whittled down our choices. I don't expect to be traveling too much over the next year or two because of everything, but he's, my son needs to get places. So, when this place came available, it became available on Thursday. We made the offer on Friday and actually looked at it on Saturday. So a little bit backwards, but we got it.
Yeah, it worked for you. And I agree with you. It doesn't look like we're going to be traveling anytime soon, but I mean, things seem to be okay in the UK and Europe, although they're not letting Americans in.
Right.
And things seem to be relatively okay in the northeastern part of the country, although Pennsylvania recently had a relapse, it sounds like, as far as cases there. But that could have had something to do with the storm. I don't exactly know, but but y'all seem to have a much better handle on it than Texas. So to just in case anybody wants to know, Texas right now is doing so poorly with Corona that we're one of those states that they won't allow, that New York and New Jersey won't allow us to visit.
Yeah, it's funny listening to that because my daughter, in her business, her job is in New York, even though she's working from our living room. I listen to one of the news stations up there sometimes in the morning just to get they do like a 4 or 5 minute news brief, the station I listen to. And, listening to the other day, I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before, I think it's up to like 34 or 35 states that you can't go into New York. And we were worried even when her first lease expired, the lease in the apartment that she got into last year when she first got the job, that was expiring. So we had to go to New York, and we were worried, if we go there, they're going to make us stay quarantined for 14 days and so forth. But fortunately we got in, we moved her stuff from the one apartment to the next. And that's the thing that just kind of sucks. She's paying rent on a place, that she may never even live in because the lease expires at the end of January. And, hopefully they'll go back and she'll get back in there because it was a nice place. And, but yeah, you just, who knows? Every day it's different. And, that's one thing that, I don't go out too much. My wife goes into the stores, again, and this, for us, I will walk over to something. Oh, I wonder what that is. And you just start touching everything. Well, this is the worst time to do anything like that, and
yeah.
No.
And that's if you manage to navigate the lines that you're supposed to stand in, right, and maintain your social distancing as you're going through the aisles of the store in the first place. So,
right.
And as I understand, it's very difficult on the visually impaired, especially, me and you, we kind of have it pretty easy here in the U.S. because the disease is so out of control that really very few people actually want to go outside. Only the people with jobs, that have been deemed essential so that they're still getting paid. A lot of people are like, there's really not a lot of reasons to go out, especially if you're not going to go out maybe to a beach or a park or something. So, right now, the blind, we're not any different than the rest of the world, whereas usually we are, we're more isolated than the average person.
Right.
Simply because of barriers to entry when it comes to transportation and when it comes to visiting stores and locating items that we want in the store. So, I could just imagine. I think it's a viral YouTube video waiting to happen for you to go into a store and start handling all the merchandise, man. starting the produce section,
Right.
I can see it now. You getting hauled off to the jail or thrown down on the ground by one of the other patrons.
Well,
But it's a viral video waiting to happen. But on the other side, it's a very serious subject that, like, for me, the other day, I had to go to our local hospital to follow up on an MRI on my knee that I had a year before, and it was just weird having to navigate from the front door of the hospital all the way through most of the first floor to the imaging section where I would go to wait in a line and not be able to go sighted guide with anybody, not really even see or hear anybody. It was kind of eerie how empty the hospital was when I was there, but it was very disorienting not being able to go, well, can I just go with you? No, you can't.
Right.
And of course, you can't bring people with you, even though while I was there, several of the staff said, you're probably one of the few people who should bring somebody with you anyway. And I'm like, okay, maybe next time, but if I get out of here, I'm not coming back here for a while. And in fact, I had a follow-up appointment with the doctor who ordered the MRI a couple of weeks ago, and I called him up and I said, look, the MRI is online. I know this because they sent me a link to it and told me I could go look at my pictures if I wanted to. I said, so I don't see why the doctor can't download the images and why we can't do this over the phone. But if we can't do this over the phone, y'all can cancel my appointment because I ain't coming.
Right.
Because the amount of the infection rate at this time in Houston is 17+%.
Oh my gosh.
It was over 25% 2 or 3 weeks ago when I decided not to go for that doctor's visit.
Wow.
It's come down quite a bit in the last couple of weeks. So, but really, it's very few people are going out. And I think I've told more than one podcaster, this really isn't stressing us blind people because this is kind of the way we lived our lives before COVID and the way a lot of us will live our lives after COVID. And it's kind of fun, considering both of us being podcasters and being guests on podcasts. It's kind of like we've gone from being the crazy uncle to being the cool guy who knows how to fix cars.
And that's, everybody says, oh, how has it been with you being at home? I said, well, it really hasn't changed for me. The difference for me is now there's 2 other people here and 2, again, when my wife and I bought this place, we knew our kids would be moving out at some point within the next year or two. My daughter had a year or two left to school, and we knew she'd be moving out when she got a job. And, at some point, I know our son wanted to move out. Well, now there's 4 of us living here, and 4 living here is okay. It's not great. It's a 3-bedroom apartment, so it's fine. But it was not made for 3 people trying to work from here. And,
right.
And that's where, that's where the issue is. And it's not just, an hour or 2 of work, after hours or whatever. I mean, it's, my daughter works, crazy hours, and my wife works, during, 9 to 3-ish. So, but, I hear what you're saying, like going through the hospital and just walking down any kind of hallway. And that's one of the issues that I have here. I try not to go out during the day because I know there might be other people in the hallway. I may not see them. And, so I try not to go out because, I don't want to get too close to them. I know they don't want me to get too close to them. And I don't want them, I don't want to run into someone and all that. So it's just been, that part's been different. And again, we're moving into a house, so, we won't have that. And, there are things that we're looking forward to about moving back into a house. One of the things, and you talked about it, about your dog. We had a dog when I was growing up, and we had a dog when the kids were growing up, and our dog Zamboni died around 16 years ago, and we've always wanted another dog. We just never got one. The kids were getting older, so we didn't get one, and then we moved in here, and you're not allowed to have pets here. So one of the things that we'll probably do is probably get a dog when, once we move and get settled in and everything is good to go. So why don't you talk about, I thought that was a funny story with with your dog and I guess your brother's dog, and And
Yeah. It's not just people that have trouble getting along when you stay with each other for extended period of time, say like a week or 2 weeks at a time during the holidays, like we used to. We had she's passed away 3 years ago now, so we had this big, friendly. We used to tell people that she was part Greyhound and part Dalmatian, which made her a Greymation. But her temperament reminded me much more of a Labrador, but a big, hairy, white dog. Never bothered anybody. Nobody ever bothered Penny. Just like the world is. It's all entertaining. I'm just going to watch the world go by, kind of a dog. Well, when we visit my brother, he has this little, maybe it's 5-pound Chihuahua named Eva. Our dog was named Penny. And so whenever we would spend time there, every time we turn around, that little nothing Chihuahua was wanting to jump on Penny and snarl and growl and snap at her and jump on her. And Penny's just looking at her like, there isn't much on me that you can even get your mouth around. And Penny would basically just sit there and take it. But the thing is it was disturbing the whole rest of the house because they wouldn't get along. And of course, I understand it was Eve's house, but still, I mean, this was like nonstop. She wanted to kill that big dog. And the old line about, dogs chasing cars, what are they going to do if they catch one? I don't know what she'd ever done if she'd actually got her teeth into Penny, because like I say, Penny weighed 90 plus pounds. There was not much small on the dog. It used to take 3 of us to give her a bath.
That is funny. Yeah. And I thought that was funny because it always seems to be those little dogs that are so, I don't know if it's because of their size, and sometimes it just seems that they're, it's like a defense mechanism to make them sound mean, even though they're really scared and they don't know. but I got a kick out of that story, and I thought, you were talking about the dog, and at the end of the book, you were saying that, it had been a few years since she had passed. And I thought, thinking about that, and, I'm like, wow, it's another thing, you and I have in common. And, I miss having a dog, and people have said, why don't you get a guide dog? And I won't. One of the guys that is a member of the National Federation of the Blind, I see him at state conventions and the national convention. His dog is just outstanding. And the dog, I always want the dog to come over to me. It's a poodle, standard poodle. And
yeah, those are like the guide dog now, because they're hyperallergenic and they don't shed. Those are really becoming popular.
And, he's like, I play with him. And I said, but the problem is my superpower, and this is my superpower. I can get the most docile dog to be a lunatic. And I don't know how I do it. I just, I get down on their level. I just pet them and pat them on the head, and they go nuts. And, we were over at a friend's house last Thanksgiving, day before Thanksgiving. And I was just bending over, petting the dog, talking to it. And the dog is going nuts. And my wife is yelling at me, what did you do to her? I said, I was just petting it. So I always said that if I got a service animal, there is no way that both of us would survive. Most likely we'd both be killed, because the dog would always think it's playing with me. I mean, I don't care that it's got a vest on. The dog knows it's me, and we'd miss the light and we'd walk into traffic or whatever.
I think you've extended that a little too far, but I think it's great that you're like, it's the kind of things that you would consider if you were going to get a dog, especially a guide dog, is your temperament and the other temperament. Me, I'm the exact opposite. There's only been 2 dogs in my entire lifetime, or 3 that didn't like me. One was on a chain and got confused when his owner was introducing me to him, and the dog, a German Shepherd, tried to kill me. Another one was a Chow, and I think that's kind of the temperament of the Chow as a breed. And if anybody out there has a Chow and is offended, I'm sorry. I've yet to meet a Chow that liked me or that I liked. There's just something about them dogs. And the third one was the Chow, the German Shepherd, The third one was just some mutt that we used to call Rang, because his owner would not discipline the dog, and the dog would come after me every day on my walk home
Oh, that's funny.
from the front of our property to our house, and I'd have to. And the stupid thing was, as soon as he had growled at me and knocked me down, he was no longer interested. I wish I'd have thought of if I'd have been smart enough at the time, I would have just thrown myself down on the ground every day and go, "Okay, Rang, we're through. You can go home now."
It's not like
so
it's not like they were bad. I didn't make them mad or angry. They just got like all revved up and ready to go. They
okay.
All right. They loved it. It was like I was an equal, and they were ready to play with me.
They recognized the kid in you, is all I can tell you.
Yeah, evidently that's what it was. And so so I was thinking about that when you were talking about Penny. So we're looking forward to having a dog again, and that'll be nice. We've dog sat over the years since Zamboni had gone, and it was nice to do. And we always did. Like I said, we always wanted something. So that'll be nice to have. But one of the other differences with us, and it made me laugh when you were talking about this with with your hair. As I am, at this moment, my head was shaved over the weekend. So I just have a little bit of peach fuzz around the rim, and of course the top is completely bald. And you were talking about in the book how you kind of changed your look when you were on this tour. Why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, well, I kind of had it changed for me. My aunt Paula, who is one of those people that it's really hard to tell her no when she gets an idea in her head, and she's always been one of the most fun people I know. She came home from a trip to go to pick up a few things at the convenience store, and she came home and said she had found some hair dye on sale. So she convinced me that she was going to dye my hair, that it would look better on camera and standing people. So she had my hair, and then she had fun with it, putting hair gel on it and styling it. And then I also ended up with that and some sunglasses. And of course, people who've seen those photos are like, Max, you really do need some sunglasses. And I was on a plane earlier this year, and somebody told me I needed to start wearing a hat. And I told them, "What do you do with a hat on a plane?" They said, "You just wear it onto the plane." I'm like, "Okay, that's all." I have to duck down half a foot to get in the darn things as it is. So, but it was a fun thing, and it was kind of like the fact that she convinced me that it would look better, and then of course the response I got on social media to the difference in just having my hair dyed, and this was before I changed my wardrobe. It was also so the response on social media was like, okay, that was something that you needed to do, and you do look a lot better, and you appear more professional, more successful, more knowledgeable. So while I would hope people would recognize just from my words that I'm offering value. Apparently, it didn't hurt much to get my hair dyed and cut, and get my eyebrows done, and then a little later on, as I kind of teased a future book or blog post. A little later on, I would meet Chelsea at a speaking event, and she would basically encourage me to take that even farther. So, now I could tie a tie, and she's either promising or threatening to teach me how to dye my own hair here any day, and to cut my own hair. So I'll be curious to see how that works out. But yeah, my Aunt Paula, she's one of those fun people. She would have went with me to New York the first time I went in 2016 if I hadn't been going during the holidays, and she just is not going to leave her kids during that time of the year.
Right.
And when it was through and people started mentioning on social media how good I looked, I said, well, I don't know what I'm going to do about this in the future. And her response was, well, the next time you book a speaking event, tell them that they need to pay for your stylist and provide me my transportation and hotel costs. So, so I now have, her and a cousin of mine, Bobby Gale, and Chelsea, of course. I have several people now who are willing to travel and be my stylist should I get to the point that I'm actually getting paid to speak and the event organizers are paying my expenses, and I can go full on diva / rock star and go, okay, yeah, besides me, you also have to provide for my stylist. That's going to be fun. So
have you kept up with the hair dyeing? Have you kept?
Oh yeah, we've kept it.
Okay.
Yeah, we've kept it up. The only really bad thing about the hair dye is that your eyebrows need it more often than your hair. So once you do the hair, you have to do the eyebrows. The other thing is that it means that you pretty much have to shave your facial hair. Otherwise, you've got relatively dark brown hair on your head, and you've got gray / white hair on your face. So it's one of those things. Once you do it, you're kind of stuck with it, and you do it pretty much all the time. Otherwise, and the truth of the matter is, I've never been able to grow a good beard or mustache, regardless of color. My hair comes in really scraggly on my face, and I've been told I remind people of Brutus from the Popeye cartoon. That my hair really, it's just not attractive when I let it grow. But thankfully, I don't have to shave it every day, which is nice. So, but yeah, we keep up the hair dye, and as part of this deal where Chelsea's going to teach me how to dye my hair, it turns out the company she likes to work with, a company called Chi, has started making their products available on Avon. So as part of this process, Chelsea's like, okay, Max, I want to see how this works. So we're going to order the hair dye through Avon. But now they don't have as many colors available on Avon as they do if you go through the wholesale supply side of Chi. So we're going to try the next closest color, which, as I understand it, has a little bit of red in it. So it'll be one more thing. And that's the great thing about being blind. If you can't see it, then you have if you can't, think about this for a minute. If you can't see it yourself, you have an excuse to ask other people what it looks like.
Right.
So some of my I've yet to have a viral moment, but some of my most responded to social media posts have just been, I just changed this. How does it look? And, people, they want to help out, and they also, they like responding to personal posts as opposed to professional posts. So it's really cool. So eventually my hair still needs to grow out just a little more before we try the new hair dye. But, that I shared that experience because, one, it was an example of doing something scary because, if you can't see it, you got no way of knowing whether it's going to turn out good or not.
Right.
And with hair dye, if it doesn't turn out well, it's not like there's a lot you can do about it in the short term, except just live with it, maybe cut it really short. Occasionally my brother Patrick has dyed his hair and it came out wrong and he just shaved his head. But trust me, I would not look good bald. That ain't working. That probably wouldn't work. So, but the other thing is an example of how there are lots of experiences we have in our lives that we don't really appreciate or enjoy because we think of them as chores or as tasks. So if you can find a way to think about something as an adventure or an experience, then it becomes a whole lot more enjoyable. And for example, I know what color we're supposed to dye my hair, but even trying a new color on it to see how that's going to work out, that's an experience. That's a risk because as we've established, and maybe it's even more, I don't know, maybe it's less because so many people are online and so many of them are really not concerned about what they look like on camera. But maybe because we have so many more people doing it, if I pick a color that doesn't go well with my face, with my skin tone, that's a risk. So to me, trying a new color, that's an experience I'm waiting to have, and that's one of the messages I wanted to get to people in the book is because people think since I'm writing about this adventure of traveling that all adventures are big adventures. But the truth of the matter is if you can find a way to make those everyday experiences into an adventure, then one, your life will be a lot more enjoyable, and two, that big adventure won't be as scary.
Right. Right. And that's, the funny story, as I've mentioned, I have very little hair up on top, but I do have a beard and a full beard. And like you say, it is, gray, white, and, and dark and, like a dark brown. The first time I got my hair buzzed was when I was at the barber and my son and I were getting our hair cut and our daughter was little, and the barber was paying more attention to our daughter, who was just kind of wandering around. She was like 2 years old or whatever. And he was trimming the back of my neck and just kept going straight up. And, and so, so that was my first buzz and I loved it. And I absolutely loved it. I remember watching, basketball highlights back in the late 80s where Charles Barkley, and Barkley, by the way, is going to be the name of our dog. Charles Barkley had the bald head and Michael Jordan had the bald head. And I kept telling a friend of ours who was black, I said, when is a white basketball player going to shave their head so I can do it too? And then Chris Mullin came along and I'm like, oh, there he is. It doesn't look terrible. It's okay if I do it. And that's, so that's,
yeah, unfortunately,
that was around the time that I thought it would be okay.
yeah. Unfortunately, Chris Mullins was never the basketball player that they thought he was going to be coming out of college.
Right.
He was the third man in what they called Run TMC, which was the San Diego, Los Angeles Clippers, I think, in the 80s, early 90s. And, it was Tim Hardaway, Mitch Richmond, and Chris Mullins,
okay.
TMC.
Yeah. So, I know. I just remember him playing for the Warriors. I don't remember.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So for Golden State, but yeah. So, and like you say, and, I used to always worry when I first had my beard and I've had my beard close to 2 years now. I mean, there were times when I just wouldn't shave for a while, but it was I never shaved my neck. And, so it was just that I hadn't shaved. It wasn't that I grew a beard. When I first started doing it, I was always concerned, oh, what if I get too close and I mess it up? And I thought, well, you know what, I'm going to shave it off and I'll, within 2 weeks, it'll be back. And that's, I said to my wife as, she, over the weekend when she gave me the buzz cut, I said, well, be careful with the beard. I said, but you know what? It's going to be under a mask. So if you mess it up, nobody will even notice because when I'm outside of here, I always have a mask on. So it doesn't even matter. So that's, it took me 55 years to just relax a little bit for stuff like that. And it took a global pandemic to, to happen, but it's happened. And, again, my hair will grow back, some of it at least. My facial hair definitely will. And so, yeah, so at this point, I'd be willing to try stuff like that. And it's just kind of funny how, how you talk about that with the coloring. And that's one reason with the having to maintain it, why my wife has never colored it. And, she's been gray since she's like 30. And and everybody says, oh, your hair is so nice. And when my daughter was in school, one of my daughter's friends or softball teammates said, oh, I love the color of your hair. I'm going to get mine colored that color. We're like, wait, what? Why don't you just wait till you get old? It'll get that way on its own. And so my wife isn't interested in in coloring it and then maintaining it every 6 or 8 weeks. And so she never has. But that's interesting about the hair, and I thought about that, and it made me laugh when I was thinking about you kind of got it wasn't something that you really wanted, but your aunt was like, yeah, let's just try it, and so it worked out, and again, that's being able to adapt to things and kind of work around stuff, and it also made me think of you don't have to rush things. I remember I was at a concert and it was a small band, and I got to meet them, and we had gone back and forth on Twitter a few times, and because I'm not in their demographics, I'm they're in their 30s, late 20s, early 30s. They knew me, so when I walked over, they're like, "Oh, you're David," and I said yes. The name of the band is 888. And so I talked with them for a couple minutes. Well, I thought I heard somebody behind me in line to get a picture with them and meet them, after the show. So I kind of rushed away thinking that there was somebody waiting because I didn't want to stop somebody else from having that. It turns out nobody was over there. And, one of the guys from the band came back over and started talking to me again for a little bit. So, you don't have to rush things. You just have to be able to, if something goes wrong, you just have to figure it out. And, and I think that's one of the things that I've always done, and maybe sometimes too well, where I think, well, if this doesn't happen, what are we going to do? And then I think of 3 other things that we can do. And sometimes, there's just no easy workaround. But like you do when you were, in New Orleans or, wanting to see ZZ Top and, missing that opportunity. And I'm not sure it was Buffalo now or if it was someplace else.
It was Buffalo. You have it right. Yeah. Okay. And and every once in a while, I do things like that myself, where I'm like, afterwards, I'm like, I'm really about being in the moment, but sometimes you just get so focused on doing the next thing that you miss something. And
right.
That was one of those times for me where I missed something. So I thought it was important to let people know that I missed something. There's another part in the book where I interviewed a woman for my podcast while I was traveling. And at the end of the podcast interview, she invited me to come spend the summer with them to do a RV caravan, to do workshops and stuff. And our response was, I've done that. I've been there and I'm not interested. But, it was because I assumed I was taking my version of caravanning. I didn't even take the time to ask them, well, when you say caravan, do you mean like trailers from the 70s, the 90s, or possibly the 2000s? You know what I mean?
Right.
I assumed, and who knows, it might have been a great, summer after the 6 weeks that are in this book if I had asked more about it instead of just assuming that it was something I didn't want to do. And so, when I make bad decisions, I like to let people know that I made them and what I think I should have done, in hopes that they won't do the same thing. And in Buffalo, it was a matter of tunnel vision. I could have changed my train ticket for maybe, it might have cost me $30 or $40, but it would have been worth it for the experience of going to a live concert in the park. That would have been a heck of an experience, even though who knows how much of it I would have really enjoyed. But I thought it was important to let people know, I got too focused on the next thing and didn't really enjoy an opportunity that was right in front of me. And I don't want people to do that. Right. I think we do way too much of that. We get focused on something, whatever that something is, and accomplishing it or getting to that destination. And we miss a lot of good stuff along the way. What's his name from the vacation movies, Clark Griswold. Right. He made a lot of mistakes during those movies. He messed up big time, but he didn't, if you think about it, he really didn't miss many opportunities to experience the stuff along the way from his town to California.
Right. Yeah. And great. What a great series of movies they are. So, all right. Again, the name of the book is The Blind Blogger's First Speaking and Signing Adventures and How You Can Conquer Your Fears. I've been speaking with Max Ivey. Max, where can people find you? I know you're a prolific Twitter, both tweeting and
well, I do my best. I like Twitter because it's easy to do on my phone as opposed to some of the other stuff. But theblindblogger.net is where they can find me. I just added the latest book to my store page, so theblindblogger.net/store. And they can also find links on there to my previous 3 books, as well as the What's Your Excuse merchandise. And that's pretty much the best place. On Twitter, I'm Maxwell Ivey, and Ivey is Ivey. And I do enjoy supporting my friends on Twitter, especially if they will think to tag me, because Twitter goes by way too quick with a screen reader. If people don't tag me, then I miss a lot of their good stuff. So I love supporting people on Twitter. But pretty much the best thing to do is to go to theblindblogger.net, and they can also send me an email at justask@theblindblogger.net. And I'm looking forward to hearing from some of the people. I would love some additional book reviews, And if you have a podcast that you need some quality guests for, I would advise you to reach out to me at theblindblogger.net or to David at ican'tseeyou.com.
Yeah, and I can tell you that we had talked about it in the past. You're very close to 30,000 followers. So if you don't already follow Max on Twitter, again, that's Maxwell Ivey is his handle.
Maxwell Ivey,
at
yeah.
Maxwell Ivey. And, go and give him a follow, get him past that 30,000 threshold. And again, you will be rewarded by his tweets, by his multitude of tweets. So, Max, I really appreciate you coming on today. I'll have a link to the book in the show notes, and that will be ican'tseeyou.com/087. Remember, I Can't See You is 7 letters, but it sounds like a whole sentence. ican'tseeyou.com/087 will be the show notes. Max, thanks again for being here.
Thanks so much for having me again, David. And I really appreciate your friendship, and I wish you all the best with the podcast and with anything else that you decide to get up to in the future.
Thanks again, Max. I do really appreciate it. And follow Max on the socials. You can see his website at theblindblogger.net. He's got some cool merch on there, and I love his t-shirt, and it's in my weekly rotation. Go ahead and check him out. And again, on Twitter, help him get to 30,000 followers at Maxwell Ivey. And again, he does tweet quite often. So there's a lot of good stuff coming from him there. And so again, Max, thanks. I appreciate it. And I will also have links in the show notes to everything that I've mentioned. And I do appreciate you joining me for the Gronk episode of the I Can't See You podcast. Remember, if you have questions or comments or complaints or show ideas, give me a call, 646-926-6350. You have up to 3 minutes to leave a message, and that would be cool. We could use it in an upcoming episode if you wish. You could also reach out via email, ican'tseeyou@gmail.com. Remember, I Can't See You sounds like a whole sentence. It's only 7 letters, ICANTCU podcast@gmail.com. And again, don't forget White Cane Coffee Company, ican'tseeyou.com/coffee. And my Amazon links, ican'tseeyou.com/Amazon. I would appreciate you buying, if you're shopping at Amazon, if you use that link, and would help us out. And the coffee link would really help out the Keystone chapter, so that would also greatly be appreciated. Again, this is episode 87 of the I Can't See You podcast. I do appreciate you listening. I hope you stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening. I'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to the I Can't See You podcast. Follow David on Twitter. He is at David Bench.